Well, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Ask the Expert, another episode of Ask the Expert. Today's topic, it sounds a little boring, but I promise you our guest is anything but boring, as you will see. HVAC, so that's heating, air conditioning, and ventilation, maintenance, and also some good tips along the way. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It is such an important component in your home. It's important for your health. We're learning all about allergens and viruses and dirt and dust and humidity and how that affects you. So there's some really good information we're going to be getting to you. Ask the Expert, for those of you who maybe are joining us for the first time, is something that we've been actually doing for years, just not online. We would get a big happy hour together, or a big group of people, and we'd sprinkle several experts in different fields, maybe a landscape architect, maybe someone like Glenn, an HVAC expert, maybe an electrician, a general contractor. We have a few of them in the room, and we'd invite our clients, and the contractors would have a name tag that said their first name and what they do. And then our guests would wander around, get a couple cocktails, and ask their questions. And it gave them a forum for meeting really good quality local businesses and getting their questions answered. And then not having to feel like, oh, I have to have somebody out and pay them for an estimate. So it was a great forum. Well, when the pandemic hit, we still wanted to keep good information going to our clients, and we still wanted to try to help local businesses. I'm a local business and a small business, and I believe in local business, and I believe in working by referral. So it was just a natural to go ahead and do Ask the Expert. So we moved it to an online forum, and we do an interview with different experts every other week. In the beginning, when we were all shut down, we were doing every week. So we think it helps our experts and their businesses, helps our clients. So it's a win-win. And we're so happy to be joined today by our friend, Glenn Hoffacker. Hi, Glenn.
Hello.
Glenn is with Presidential Heating and Air Conditioning, and he is a Washington area native who started his career in construction-related sheet metal work, interestingly, at the Washington Harbor. He did that for a few years until he almost got blown off a roof, and we're so glad you didn't, Glenn. And then somebody told him, maybe you should try sales. In some ways, lower risk. I guess it depends how the sale goes. So Glenn was skeptical at first and got into heating and air conditioning related sales, and has found that he really loves it. He's worked for a variety of companies throughout the region, but he's been with Presidential since 2013, and he enjoys working for Presidential because they have a very good reputation and very good reviews online. You can check them. My father, who was notoriously difficult on contractors and worked with us part-time in the business, really was a big fan of Presidential and the owner of Presidential. So good company, and if they passed my dad's test, I knew they were a good company. So I think it's a good match too for Glenn, because his philosophy is to be hands-on with his clients and to educate them as he sells to them. And he likes to provide them with many options, and he will give you his opinion. So if you don't want somebody who will share his opinion, Glenn might not be the person for you. But I always say, I don't like going to the restaurant where you ask the waiter, what's your favorite meal, and they won't tell you. So I think you'd be very happy if you met with Glenn. I feel confident referring him because he has taken such good care of my clients, and I can always get a good, honest answer out of him. And I wanted to share an interesting fact. If you have Glenn out to your house, you'll learn that he is an animal lover. He always keeps dog and cat treats in the car, and he'll ask the property owner or resident if he can give a TREAT. So he does ask permission. And Glenn is a diehard Washington football fan and has raised up 4 good kids here in the metro region. So Glenn, again, thank you for joining us. Before we get to talking with Glenn, and we're going to ask him some questions, and if we have time at the end, we'll get to your questions. I'm going to give you a real quick market update because we always get those questions as well. As we've been seeing for the last few months, contract activity in our varied jurisdictions, we have 6 jurisdictions in and around DC, for the past week was up over where it was the same week last year. So in fact, it was up 30.1%. All 6 of our jurisdictions posted gains, some more than others. So Loudoun County last week was up 51.5% over the same week last year. That's incredible. Montgomery County, 32.3%, so about a third higher. And then DC, just 5.8. But again, they all posted gains. And in the last week, 1,574 homes, all price ranges, all styles in those 6 jurisdictions went under contract. They went under contract in an average of 23.5 days, which is down considerably. This time last year, that was 38.5. So huge difference in terms of the time a property spending on the market. And that speaks a lot to supply and demand. Interestingly, though, the number of homes that went under contract this past week compared to the week before, so now not looking at the same week the year before, but week over week, was down 8.4%. So that's our 5th week in a row that we've just seen contract activity edging down a little bit each week. But it's still outpacing last year by leaps and bounds. I'll add on a personal note, I work by referral, as I said at the beginning, and we've had listings recently in Herndon in Fairfax County, Woodbridge in Prince William County, and Silver Spring in Montgomery County, and we have received multiple offers on all of them. In fact, we've got a very charming mid-century modern on right now, and we have multiple offers we'll be presenting later. So I like to use the analogy that the market is like speeding. You're going from about 90 miles an hour down to 75 miles an hour. You're still speeding. It's still moving fast, but it is slowing down. So I do not want to spend any more time on the market, but I want to say if you have questions about your specific area or an area you're interested in, please do reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer questions and run some research for you. In fact, I was doing that just this morning for somebody. Now I want to not delay any further. And Glenn, thank you again for joining us. We're so happy you're here with us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Ann. I always appreciate your business and your referrals and all that you do for me.
Well, we're happy to refer you because you make us look good and you take good care of our clients. So let's launch right in, and we'll have a good lively discussion if we have time at the end. Jennifer has Facebook Live going. You can send us your questions. If we run out of time, I encourage you to reach out to Glenn. He is so good about answering questions and helping you. So Glenn, let's launch right in with a question about the best steps that a homeowner can take to maintain and hopefully prolong the life of their HVAC system. This comes up a lot at home inspections, and a lot of newbies just don't know how to maintain a system. So if you could give us some tips, that would be great.
That's a good question. Today's newer systems are not like some of the older systems that required belts and oiling and so forth. Most of them are pretty much self-sealed and so forth. There's not too much a homeowner can do, with the exception of making sure you keep your filters clean at all times. You want to make sure also that your outside unit is not covered with shrubbery, that it's important for it to have airflow going through it. So taking care of those things pretty much all you can do is keep the filters as clean as you possibly can, and make sure the outside unit doesn't have anything growing around it, if you will.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the outside unit, because I think people sometimes remember to change their filters inside, and Jennifer just brought up a good graphic, but I think they forget to get out there and carefully trim around the AC condenser. Don't damage the little fins that you see, like people will weed whack a little too close. But keep those tall grasses, weeds, leaves away from the unit so that it runs optimally. Glenn, you were kind enough to share some of these photos with us. Do you want to tell us what we're seeing?
Yeah, you only get a chance to do this when you're taking out an old system. And as I like to start the guys out on the job, I like to also see what came out. I like to also bring the customers out and say, hey, take a look at what you're breathing, and take a look at how much this is blocked and how much airflow you're losing, and how inefficient the system's running, because there wasn't a good filter in there. And that's what happens when you don't put a good filter inside your system. We call the evaporator coil the secondary filter, if you will, because if it doesn't stop by the filter, it usually stops there at the coil.
And that's what we're seeing in the top 2 photos on the left?
Yeah, so it's if you were inside the furnace looking up at, because the air goes through that. That looks just like a radiator in the shape of an A-frame. Okay. Basically is what it is. And it's just basically exchanging heat.
Okay. And then the bottom there is well, I was going to say it's a typical filter. It should not be a typical filter in most homes, but that is the shape of a typical filter that was maybe left in a little too long, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what will happen. Those filters do a good job. You know, there's so many different filters out there that you can purchase. You know, from the 1-inch filter that you're looking at over on the right-hand side and on the left bottom. That's probably one of the most common filters because it's easier for the homeowner to buy and slip in and slip out.
Yeah, I have those, but after talking to you, I have some ideas of improvements I want to make. So, you know, Glenn, you also mentioned to me, like, if right now so many people are spending more time in their homes, homeschooling, working from home, you know, the air quality should really be top of mind. I mean, I know it is in the sense that people are out and about with masks, but it brings to mind, you know, those N95 masks, which we can talk about a little later, but they're filtering the air, right? And the filter in your home works in a similar way. And if you are doing construction in your home, which is where I was going with this, because so many people are like, they're home and they're saying, I need to improve my space. You know, while I'm here, let me get the bathroom redone. Let me take down a wall. And you had a really good point you made about like drywall dust, construction dust, sawdust. Would you share that with people?
Yeah, a lot of times we run into situations where a homeowner will refinish their basement or do some work in their house, and they'll keep the system running while they're sanding drywall, and it will do really bad damage to the system to where you can't even really get it clean thoroughly. So I always recommend, if you're doing something like that, do not run the system. You know, wait for the dust to settle down, and then of course check your filters regularly too. But yeah, never ever run the system when you're doing construction in your home, because it will do some damage to it and get it very dirty.
So I asked Glenn when we were talking about this, you know, what do you do if you have a crew in your house and it's winter and it's cold, or, you know, you're building an addition. And he gave me a tip I didn't know before this, which is that you can ask your contractor to bring portable heaters and build that into the contract, right, Glenn?
That's correct. That's what we asked the general contractor. That's why I have torpedo heaters and things like that. That's what they should be running in a new construction site, and not trying to get the heat up and running and you know, heat the whole house so that everybody's comfortable while they're working in the winters, you know.
I thought that was a really good point. So we should all remember that. So we aren't, you know, we set a budget for the work we want done, but we're not thinking about gumming up our system and gosh, are we going to have to get a new air handler or whatever, you know?
Exactly.
Glenn, sort of related, I know you have mixed feelings about service contracts, and I think how well they're utilized or how much they're needed really depends a lot on the household. You know, do they have a lot of pets? Are they allergy sufferers? Are they clean and tidy people? Do they vacuum a lot? But let's just say, generally speaking, we're talking about getting a service contract. What would be checked during a service call? And then how does a layperson know if a tech is doing all they should be doing?
That's a great question. I think the number one reason, and that I didn't get a chance to talk to you about yesterday, was if you call any air conditioning company in the middle of July, the first thing they're going to ask you is, do you have an agreement with us? And right. If you don't, unfortunately, you get put to the back of the line, because we have to be loyal to our customers that have an annual agreement with us. So that, to me, is probably one of the most important, or the most important reason to have a service agreement, along with coming out and doing preventive maintenance to hopefully, you know, prevent a breakdown. If there's a loose wire, to tighten the wire and so forth. Check the pressures on the refrigerant. If you have a heat pump or an air conditioner, you want to make sure that the pressures are within specs. And by the way, a lot of people think that Freon gets used up and you have to add it. That's normal. No, it's not. If you ever have to add Freon to a system, it means you have a leak and you need to address the leak. And a lot of times you can't fix the leak, so you just have to replace the system, unfortunately.
Well, you know what? You just brought up a good point, because when you don't have a service contract and your AC breaks is the day it's 102 degrees and like 500% humidity, right? And it's the first day in a long string of those days where you're going to be laying in bed at night sweating and cursing, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So you always want to make sure, our preventative maintenance is designed to come out in the spring, make sure it's ready to go for the summer, come out in the fall, and make sure your heating system is ready to go for wintertime.
All right. So that's a good reason in and of itself to have a service contract. And again, those of you watching, balance it against what you know about yourself. You know, do you have, I did an interview at a place yesterday that has 2 dogs, 1 cat, and getting another cat and a parrot. they may need a little more attention than the average household. So I was thinking, Glenn, you and I had a conversation about condensate lines and those getting clogged. Now, can that be an add-on to a service contract?
Absolutely. There's all kinds of things that the technician should bring up to the attention of the homeowner and say, listen, this is a potential problem that's going to happen. You may want to have this taken care of. They will give you options on other services that they feel that you will need. They're not going to, you know, offer you something that you don't need. But if they seek something out and say, hey, this customer should have a safety on this drain here, because of this, they're just getting brand new flooring down in the basement, and if this drain clogs up, you know, we should have a safety on it. So that's where they'll go in and say, look, we're going to clean your drain and we're going to also put a safety in it. So that's a very important. Everybody's probably had a condensate leak once in their life. Yeah.
It seems like a common occurrence and a simple one to remedy, but that's why I wanted to ask about it. So, so Glenn, another thing I hear a lot at home inspections or from my clients is about like airflow. How do you know that what's going on in your home is sufficient? The airflow, or maybe that it's not cooling or heating like you think it should, or the heat or cool isn't reaching, you know, from the furnace down here in the basement up to this far corner room. So, you know, if a customer has a question about is what they have sufficient, what can be tested and potentially remedied?
Okay, let's start with the ductwork systems. These are all good things. You got to start out with, you know, the ductwork system can be checked via, the best way to have it done is there's a company called AeroSeal that does internal duct sealing. They basically go from the inside and they put in this formula. I don't want to use the term adhesive, but it's basically like an adhesive, and it will fill a gap up to 5/8 of an inch thick. So if you've got duct leaks problem throughout your house, that's the only way that you can really test, because they'll come out. I've had this done before where they'll come out and they'll say, hey, your system is supposed to be delivering X amount of airflow, but it's only delivering 60% of that. And then they'll show you afterwards, well, we got it up to where it's 95% not leaking. And then that's a third of the difference of airflow. That's tremendous.
Huge,
that's really that's the only way that you can check to make sure that your ductwork is not leaking. And all ductwork systems leak, unfortunately, unless it's a newer system that they use the hard cast, which you're showing, or it's actually called mastic, and it's that gray. It paints on, and once it's on, it's very difficult to get off. It's just like hardening cement, basically, is what it is. So it will.
So that's that stuff in that lower, in that like left photo.
That's how new. You know, if you're doing a new duct system today in a home, new construction, that's what is required by law, by code. You have to seal it like that. Older homes, you're not going to see that unless the homeowner did it himself or had a contractor come in. The downside to it is a lot of times ductwork is not accessible. So therefore you would go to the AeroSeal and seal it from the inside out, because you don't need to. All you got to do is get down to the furnace and you can seal the entire duct system up that way internally. So there's two ways to seal it, one internally and one externally.
Yeah, I think that's pretty impressive, that the top two photos there, because you can see the hole in the circle on the left and then it's sealed up. And I guess if you have those sprinkled all throughout your system, it really affects the efficiency. And Glenn, like, how do those holes get there? Was it bad installation from the beginning, like the house settling and shifting, repair work over the years? Like, how does that usually happen?
It's an installation flaw. Okay. If that ductwork was connected correctly and the slip and drive was put on correctly, that gap wouldn't be there.
Got it.
Okay. It's just a matter of, you know, they probably got in a hurry and they got three sides done, the corner's leaking, so what? Let's just move on.
Yeah.
But that's quite common. You know, they found all kinds of things in ductwork when they go to clean it out, from hidden magazines in ducts that the kids hide, I guess, and all kinds of socks, clothes, food, you name it.
Oh, liquor bottles.
Yeah. So, but that's really, it's a neat process. I learned about it 30 years ago, back in 1990. Wow. When Georgetown University had a trade show and AeroSeal was there. And I just shook my head and said, yeah, this is not going to take off, but it has taken off, and it does a very good job. And they will give you a great before and after reading of your leakage of your ductwork.
You know, I've just heard more about it in the last 10 years, but I will say to those of you watching, this is coming from a layperson. I mean, I'm in real estate, but I'm not an HVAC expert. I did call several of my clients or contacts I knew who had had this done, and I asked them, and they were all big fans of it. So it's definitely worth considering. And of course, Glenn can get you more information about that. Glenn, you gave me such a good example of like the person who calls you when it's, using my earlier example, 102 degrees outside. They call you and they say, yeah, I can't get my temperature down to 70 degrees in the house. And you explain the system is not designed that way. Would you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question that I run into problems with all the time with customers. That an air conditioner is only designed to really do about a 20-degree temperature difference. In other words, if it's 90 degrees outside, you should be able to maintain 70 inside the home. 95 outside, 75 indoor temperature. That's all. Now, it can do a little bit better than that, but we have to design for an average, if you will. We can't design for one 100-degree day, and if it never hits 100 degrees, we've got an oversized system the rest of the summer. So that's where they come up with the guidelines, if you will, of here's the temperature difference, 20 degrees. And then that's how you do a load calculation. You size the house and you find out what size does it really need. Okay. And then you put the size in based on that, what the size of the system that you need.
Do things like tree cover and the direction you face, like my house is southwest facing, which is pretty hot. And it faces onto, an open asphalt area. I mean, there's a little bit of greenery, but do those kinds of things factor in too?
Exactly. Yeah, that's another good question, because people call up and say, I have a 2,000 square foot house. What size do I need? Well, take a 2,000 square foot townhouse that only has 2 exposed walls. That's going to need an entire different size system than a single family home with 4 exposed walls. Okay. And going back to which way your house is positioned, take a 2-story colonial. Where are most of the windows? On the front and the back, right? So if the house is facing front east, west back, you're going to need a bigger air conditioner. If you spin the house 90 degrees and have it facing north, you're only going to get the southern exposure. The east and west is going to hit the sides of the house where there's not much glass. You'll need a smaller system. So that's where square footage is one small factor of doing a heating load calculation, if you will.
Got it. So all these are really good factors, which I will be bringing up with my own clients. And when I get questions for HVAC and have them call you, I can prime the pump a little bit. Another question that I had is, I was at Home Depot recently buying my pleated, filters, because I want to talk a little more about filters, better quality ones, in a second. But I was looking at the MERV rating, MERV. Can you speak to that, what it is and why it's important?
Yes, a MERV rating is something that it's basically a rating that you can compare. The higher the MERV rating, the smaller the particulate it will take out of the air system. So it's kind of like, the better the gas mileage, the better. Same thing with this here. Some of the 1-inch filters start out at a low MERV, maybe 3, 4, or 5. Here we go. That's going to tell you what you need. So this is a great chart here that I can't really see probably. So, but they're showing you 3 different categories, if you will, of filters. And the good ones are going to be the ones that are going to be the 1-inch thick. Now, you have to be careful with the 1-inch thick ones too, because some of those that are very, very tightly woven, our system, some of our Carrier Infinity systems are intelligent enough to sense the drag on the motor, like a filter was dirty, and
wow.
it'll tell your thermostat to change your filter. I get phone calls all the time. Glenn, just got the system in, just put a new filter in, and it's telling me I got to change the filter. Something's wrong with the system. And I'm like, time out. What kind of filter you putting in? Oh, I got one of them real good $30 1-inch filters. Yeah, they're good at stopping the dust and dirt and the airflow. So you got to be very, very careful when, MERV is 1 rating. What I prefer, if you look down here on the left, you're looking at the same kind of pleated filter. However, it's 5 inches thick.
Yeah, I see that.
So the material on that, the surface area is much larger. So that filter there, that's my favorite filter. It's not electronic. It's not very expensive. It's just a great filter that will stop all the dust and dirt, yet will let the air flow through because of the amount of surface area.
You mentioned this filter with you know, the 4 or 5 inches thick, and I thought about my own system, and I thought, well, where would I can't insert that. It's too, you know, too big for the 1 inch space or whatever. And so I think you said that you can adapt your existing system to add something like that, so you can utilize a better filter with an existing system. It didn't have to be designed that way from the beginning, right?
Exactly. You're providing there's room to put the filter in. As you can see, that filter is measured 7 inches wide. So as long as you have a space 7 inch between your filter or, you know, where your furnace or your air handler is to where your return duct comes in, we can adapt that in there. More times than not, there's room to do that. So yeah, there's a variety. That's just one air cleaner that I think is isn't that in the better category?
Yeah, can you?
It's in between the better and the best, because that is actually a MERV 13, so that's in the best category.
Okay.
So that to me,
I think it's funny that we both have to get so far forward.
Yeah, I know. That's some small writing, but no, that filter's there. But if you want something even better, I mean, all that filter is going to do there is stop the dust and the dirt and small particles. It's not going to do anything as far as killing viruses. Carrier has and so does Aprilaire, and so does probably everybody. They have filters that are electronic, that have filters like this, media filters inside with electronic parts also, that will capture and kill viruses. In fact, Carrier has their Infinity Air Cleaner. You go online and it talks about it will capture and kill the COVID-19 virus.
Wow.
So that's quite a thing to tout, but they've done it. They've tested it. That air cleaner is in a lot of the buildings downtown, the federal buildings. When anthrax came out, that's when Carrier designed that filter. They have since redesigned it a couple times, and it's a little bit smaller now. But it's if you're really looking for the top of the line filter, you can go with an electronic version of what I just showed you.
So if we pick electronic, I know from you educating me, electronic filters can be very good and really improve your indoor air quality. But you want to be careful not to get the ones that also add ozone problems, right?
Excellent. I'm glad you brought it up. The older style Carrier, Honeywell electronic air cleaners, we call them, they snap, crackle, and pop. They basically tick, 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 just like a bug zapper is what it's doing. Instead of zapping bugs and killing them, it's zapping dust. The challenge is that this is the one on the right, if you'll go back. Yeah, the one that's all the way on the right, the electronic filter. That's the one that it has a positive and a negative charge. And once the plate gets covered, the problem with it is it then starts to produce ozone. And ozone is an irritant to your lungs and should not be in the household. You can go on American Lung Association and the American Cancer Society and find that information out. But that electronic air cleaner, in my opinion, is bad for you. So like everything, they have good humidifiers and they have not so good humidifiers. So you got to make sure with everything you look at, you know what's available and know the difference.
And I see the one in the middle here, and I really appreciate you talking about the difference. I see the one in the middle has the UV lights, and you talked about, you know, Carrier. And I know from, sadly, not too long ago, spending a ton of time in an ICU, you know, when you walk in, they hit you with those UV lights. So I figure they must be pretty effective. And I believe you've told me if you get one of those UV air scrubbers, they're real good about keeping the mold off your condenser, was it?
Yeah, this UV light's a little bit different than the
coil.
UV light. Yeah, that goes over the coil. I usually will ask customers, you know, do you have any allergies to mold? Is mold a problem? And if they say yes, then I say you must have a UV cleanser right there at the coil where mold will grow. That's, you know, normally how I will approach that subject. That Lennox actually is taking those bulbs and it's charging there's a filter in there that you don't change. You just, it's like a permanent filter that it charges the filter as the air passes through. I had that filter in my house and I liked it. The problem with it was very expensive to keep up. You're looking at, I think, and this was my cost of stuff, close to $400 to $500 to replace all 4 bulbs. To replace, there's also a filter in there that gets changed. So I don't like that, you know, if that was the only thing out and that was the price of doing business and to getting clean air, I'd probably promote it more, but there are other things that don't cost as much and that are not as hard to maintain and keep up as that Lennox.
So maybe the folks that have real severe problems and money is not as big of an object, that's a great solution. But for other people, like I said earlier, guys, Glenn will give you his opinion. So you can ask your questions and he'll tell you what, you know, what may or may not work, and he'll give you options. So no, this is really good info, the Lennox. And you can get, just to clarify, you can get UV lights on your system without them having to be in this Lennox.
That's correct.
What do you call this Lennox thing? Pure air purification system.
Uh-huh.
So you can get them, you can get benefits of UV lights another way. It doesn't have to be through this.
Correct. You know what's interesting? This cabinet, the extended media cabinet by Aprilaire.
Uh-huh.
You can actually take the Lennox guts and it'll fit inside that cabinet. Lennox and I think Aprilaire got together on that air cleaner.
Oh, that's smart. Okay, so that's the Aprilaire on the left, guys. If you're watching, you can't quite make it out, like Glenn and I, who are getting older eyes. This is really good info, and we're getting just so close to the end of our time. I wanted to ask a real quick question about humidifiers, and we saw something earlier that Jennifer gave us a graphic. Oh yeah, here we go. Could you speak to humidifiers real quickly before we wrap up?
Yes, this is an excellent chart, Jennifer. Thank you so much. It's critical to be in the optimum zone there in the middle. If your house is too dry, it's not good for you. It's not good for your health. If it's too wet, it's too moist, it's also not good for your health, and mold will grow and all kinds of things. To keep the things from growing, you want to be in that center area there. And the only way to do that in the wintertime is to add a whole house humidifier, or you could use room humidifiers, yes. But those you got to clean every night. Like anything else, they make good humidifiers. Aprilaire, all their humidifiers are good. Some of the older style humidifiers, customers have had a bad experience with a flood maybe, and or the old style humidifiers would fill a pan of water up and there'd be a sponge, and the water would sit and the sponge would get there. And what? Yeah, those actually yeah, you can find articles that they cause Legionnaire's disease. So there are humidifiers, and they still make them, that are out there that are bad for you. But of course, I'm not going to, we don't offer any of those. That Aprilaire is a flow-through humidifier where there's never any standing water. The one there is called a bypass, where they're actually using a duct, and they're using air from the furnace system to force air through that duct, through a water panel, and then bringing the air or bringing the moisture that way. That is designed for, there's a couple types of humidifiers. That's a bypass.
Yeah. One of the biggest issues I see at home inspections is that people have installed these, maybe a previous owner, whomever, and they haven't had a service contract and they haven't been getting these cleaned. And just like the ones you use in your room, if you get bronchitis over the winter, you know, if you don't clean it, it gets that calcification, right?
That's correct.
So you've got to keep that, you know, maybe that's going back to our earlier question. Maybe that's another good reason for a service contract. Make sure you're getting that clean twice a year, and then you know it's functioning optimally.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a real easy humidifier. You take the panel out, you throw it away, you put another one in. But the challenge is you have to put it in right side up. A lot of customers go to change the filter, and there's a little spot of paint where somebody just took a spray can and went, and it just, that means this side up. And if you put it in upside down, water goes everywhere. And they say, this humidifier is a piece of junk. I don't want it. I turned it off. I haven't used it since. And I'm like, time out. It's not a piece of junk. You didn't use it correctly, you know, and that's where, like I said, you don't have to, our guys can take care of all that for you on a maintenance agreement. So we can, if you do decide to get a UV light and a humidifier and an air cleaner, we can wrap that all up in you know, a service agreement where we come out twice a year and make sure that your humidifier package change every winter. Make sure UV bulb, some of the bulbs you can go 2 years. UV bulbs do lose intensity, and you have to, they are required to be replaced. The carriers, I think, every 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think people don't always stay on top of that kind of thing. And that's why this education is so good. And it's so important. I mean, air quality, think about it. You gave me a great analogy. Let's wrap up with this. N95. What does that stand for?
It stands, that mask says it's 95% effective against viruses. I have an air cleaner, my presidential air cleaner, it's made by Aprilaire, that has a MERV 16 filter that we can put in that is also 95% effective against viruses. So we can put a mask on your house, basically.
Yeah. So guys, we're all thinking about it. We're wearing masks, right? let's make sure our indoor air quality, because we're spending more time at home, is as good as what we want to be hitting us when we're out and about. So I think it's just top of mind. We just need to apply it to our houses, you know? Glenn, this, I mean, I could ask, you would think it's a boring, I mean, I'm not trying to offend you about your industry, but you would think, like, how much could there be to talk about? I could ask you another 15 questions. This raises so many questions for me. And I'm so appreciative of you taking the time today and sharing your knowledge. This is Glenn's info about how to contact him. Again, he works for Presidential. He serves the metro region, at least for my customers. And he's fantastic. You can trust him in your home. You can trust him to give you options and tell you what he thinks. And he's going to ask you questions. So it's not a blanket answer. It's about you and what's important to you. How do you live? What's, you know, what are the circumstances that might impact your indoor air quality and so on. So, in fact, he's told me some great things about products. I'll leave you with a teaser, products coming down the pike that will affect your air quality. Right, Glenn?
That's correct.
What was the name of it again? Just give us a teaser.
It's basically, they're trying to push out all the volatile organic compounds that when we buy a new sofa that's treated with formaldehyde and Scotchgard to new carpet, all of that. And houses are made tighter and tighter. So what they're concerned about is you know, indoor air quality is worse than outside. You know, as you know, it's polluted. It's terrible. So they're trying to put your house under a positive pressure to push out all the VOCs out of your house so you're not breathing them as things off gas.
Yes. So be on the lookout for that, guys. If you watch the Erin Brockovich movie, you know, the follow-up to that was she bought a house that made her sick because it was sealed so tight. She was inside with poor air quality, and you can find, you know, you can research that online and find out about it, but it's a real thing. And there's some good products coming down the line. Glenn is a great resource. You just saw his contact information. If you ever need to get in touch with him and can't find it, reach out to me or Jennifer. We'll always have it. And you can rewatch this on YouTube. We hope you'll share this good information with your friends and family and colleagues. We'll be on YouTube. We'll be on Ann McClure Facebook, Ann McClure Realtor Facebook, and on our website. Glenn will also have the video, and he'll have a link to it if he wants to send it out to people. And again, Glenn, we thank you for being here today. Jennifer, thank you for the great graphics. You did a great job. And please don't keep us a secret. If you know somebody who wants to buy or sell a home anywhere in the country, because I can help you or your loved ones find a good realtor somewhere else. We're working on that in a couple of locations, in fact, right now. Please contact me about your real estate needs. I'm always happy to help answer questions. And look for us again in 2 to 3 weeks. I have to get the information out. 2 weeks is Thanksgiving week. So we're debating, do we do it that week or push back a week? But we'll get the information out for the next Ask the Expert. Thank you for joining us today. I know we ran a little long. We thank you for hanging in there. Take care.